There are moments that divide your life into before and after, moments so unexpected that they knock the breath from your lungs and leave you standing there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. That night started like any other, ordinary and uneventful, but it ended with something I could never have predicted, something that changed everything. It was late, the house steeped in silence except for the occasional creak of the wooden floors settling. My husband was out of town for a business trip, leaving me alone in the house with my stepson. It wasn't unusual. We had spent nights like this before without issue, but tonight, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, an energy I couldn't quite place, a shift in the usual rhythm of things that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I had been in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The house was too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath, waiting. And then, a sound. Faint, deliberate. The unmistakable shuffle of movement just outside my door. I sat up slowly, my pulse quickening. The hallway was dark except for the dim glow of the night light near the staircase, casting long shadows that flickered and swayed. I listened, straining to hear past the steady thump of my own heartbeat. There it was again, a soft, almost hesitant noise, as if someone was standing just outside my door. I swallowed hard. It could have been anything. The house settling, a breeze slipping through a crack in the window. But deep down, I knew better. Something wasn't right. I slipped out of bed, my feet hitting the cool wooden floor as I moved toward the door, my breath caught in my throat. With slow, cautious movements, I reached for the doorknob, my fingers wrapping around the cold metal, pausing for the briefest second before turning it. The door opened a crack, just enough for me to see the shadows standing in the hallway. I inhaled sharply, my stomach twisting as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. My stepson. He was standing there, still as a statue, his face partially illuminated by the soft glow of the nightlight. His expression was unreadable, but there was something unsettling in the way he was just standing there. I blinked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing?" For a second, he didn't answer, didn't even move, and then, finally, his lips parted. I couldn't sleep. His voice was calm, too calm, and yet there was something in his tone, something almost expectant. A chill ran down my spine. That doesn't explain why you're standing outside my door. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. He took a step forward, just a fraction of movement, but it was enough to send my pulse into overdrive. I suddenly felt too aware of the fact that we were alone in the house, that there was no one else here, that whatever this was, whatever was happening, it was just between us. I forced myself to breathe, go back to bed. He didn't move right away. He just stood there, staring at me, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he finally nodded, his body shifting as he turned, his footsteps quiet as he walked back to his room. I shut the door, my hands trembling as I pressed my back against the wood, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't know what had just happened. I didn't know why it had felt so strange, so charged. But one thing was certain. Something wasn't right. And I had a terrible feeling this was only the beginning. Sleep didn't come easily after that. Every creak of the house, every faint rustle of movement made me sit up, alert, listening. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe he really had just been unable to sleep and I was reading too much into it, but my body refused to relax. My instincts screamed at me that something was off, that something was shifting beneath the surface of what I thought I understood about my own home. As the hours crawled by, my mind wouldn't let it go. The way he had been standing there, the way he hadn't looked surprised when I opened the door, the way he had hesitated before answering me, none of it sat right. I found myself replaying it over and over again, searching for something I had missed, something that might explain what I had felt in that moment. By the time the first rays of morning light seeped through my window, I felt exhausted, but no closer to an answer. I got up slowly, my body aching from lying awake all night, and made my way downstairs, my senses still on high alert. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. I could feel his presence somewhere, that same lingering tension from the night before pressing against my skin. I walked into the kitchen, reaching for the coffee pot, but as I turned toward the counter, my breath hitched. My stepson was already there, sitting at the table, watching me. He hadn't made a sound. I hadn't even realized he was there until I turned. And the way he was looking at me, the way his eyes followed my every movement, made my stomach twist into a knot. I forced a small smile, trying to shake the unease. "You're up early." He didn't respond right away, just tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. "So are you." I hesitated, gripping the edge of the counter. Couldn't sleep. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Me neither. The air between us felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't define, something that made my pulse quicken against my will. I wanted to ask him about last night, about why he had been standing outside my door, but I couldn't seem to make the words come out. Instead, I just stood there, gripping the counter, pretending that the way he was looking at me didn't make my skin prickle. I had no idea what was happening, no idea why the dynamic between us suddenly felt different, but as I stood there in the quiet of the kitchen, one thing became painfully clear. Whatever had started last night wasn't over, and I had a sinking feeling it was only going to get worse. The weight of his stare pressed against me, unspoken words lingering in the air like a storm on the horizon, heavy and unavoidable. My hands clenched the edge of the counter, my mind scrambling for something, anything, that would make this moment feel normal, that would pull me back to reality where things made sense. But nothing did. My stepson sat at the table, fingers lightly drumming against the wooden surface, his gaze steady, unwavering. It wasn't a look of defiance, nor was it one of innocence. It was something else entirely. Something that made my stomach tighten with unease. The coffee pot gurgled, the quiet sound filling the silence between us, stretching it, making it unbearable. I turned my back to him, reaching for a mug, needing a moment to compose myself. "Did you sleep at all?" I finally asked, forcing my voice to stay even, to sound casual, as if last night hadn't happened, as if I hadn't woken up to find him standing just outside my door, lingering like a shadow waiting to be noticed. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Not really." I inhaled slowly, my fingers tightening around the handle of the mug as I poured the coffee, the dark liquid swirling as steam rose into the air. I didn't turn around right away. I needed a second to push down the gnawing discomfort twisting in my chest. "You?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost as if he already knew the answer. I let out a small, humorless laugh. "No." I turned back to him, coffee in hand, and leaned against the counter, watching him carefully, trying to piece together the shift, the reason why it suddenly felt like the house, the air, the very space between us had changed. He tilted his head slightly, eyes still locked onto mine. "Why not?" The question sent a shiver through me, not because of the words themselves, but because of the way he said them, as if he already knew why I had lain awake all night, as if he had been waiting for me to admit it. I swallowed hard. I just couldn't. He nodded slowly, as if he understood something I didn't. Me neither. A chill ran down my spine. I set the coffee down on the counter, pretending I needed both hands free, but really, I just didn't like how unsteady my grip felt. "Are you okay?" I asked, watching him carefully. His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile, but not far from it either. Why wouldn't I be? I opened my mouth, but no words came out, because I didn't know how to answer that. I didn't know how to explain why my skin prickled, why my instincts were screaming that something was wrong, that something had shifted between us in a way I wasn't ready to acknowledge. The silence stretched again, thick and suffocating. Then he leaned back slightly, his fingers still drumming against the table. "You seemed surprised last night." My breath hitched. My entire body stiffened before I could stop it, and he noticed. I saw it in the way his lips curved just slightly, in the way his eyes flickered with something unreadable. I forced myself to stay still. "What do you mean?" His fingers stopped drumming. He exhaled slowly, measured, calculated. "When you opened the door, you looked like you weren't sure what to say." My throat tightened. "That's because I wasn't expecting anyone to be there." He tilted his head slightly. "Is that all?" I swallowed, my pulse quickening. "Of course." His gaze held mine for a long moment, searching, as if trying to find a crack, a weakness, something unspoken lingering between us. Then, finally, he smiled, a small, knowing smile that made my stomach flip, though I couldn't understand why. "Okay," he said simply, before standing up. I watched him, my breath shallow, my fingers digging into my palms. He grabbed an apple from the counter, took a slow bite, then started toward the hallway. But just as he reached the doorway, he paused. "You should try to get some rest today," he said, his back still to me. "You look tired." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. He left the kitchen, his footsteps quiet as he disappeared down the hall. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, gripping the counter as my knees felt unsteady beneath me. I should have let it go. I should have pushed the entire thing out of my mind, convinced myself that I was overreacting, that I was being ridiculous. But I couldn't, because deep down I knew this wasn't nothing. Something was happening. Something had already begun. And I wasn't ready for what came next. The rest of the day passed in a haze of overanalyzing every moment from the night before, every lingering glance, every subtle shift in his tone. I tried to tell myself that I was imagining it, that it was all in my head, but the feeling wouldn't leave. It sat heavy in my chest, a warning that I couldn't ignore. That night, when I finally went back to bed, I told myself I would sleep, that I wouldn't let my paranoia control me. But the moment I turned off the lights, the silence of the house felt suffocating again. My ears strained for any sound, any hint that he was awake, that he was moving through the halls. And then, just as I was beginning to drift off, I heard it. A soft creak, the sound of footsteps just outside my door. I turned onto my side, my breath hitching in my throat, my pulse pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The handle of my door shifted, not turning, not opening, just a slow, deliberate test. I held my breath. Seconds passed, then a minute, then another. And then, just as quietly as it had come, the presence outside my door faded. The floorboards creaked once more as the steps retreated, disappearing down the hall. I lay there for what felt like forever, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to move, too afraid to even breathe. Because now I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't in my head. Something was happening, and it wasn't over.